The night started quietly. The cold light of the street lamp seeped through the curtains, drawing long, pale shadows on the walls of the girl's bedroom. 12-year-old Lisa lived with her father in a small house on the outskirts, old but cozy. The wooden porch creaked. There was a closet with children's drawings in the corridor. The kitchen always smelled of tea. After her mother's death, her father became her parent, friend, and protection in one person. They kept their rituals. They had lunch together. Their father read her strange old stories before going to bed, and on Sundays they repaired things in the garage together. Their relationship was simple and strong, like family boards gathered in warmth. That day, my father left in the morning, as usual, whining a funny phrase, which he always said goodbye to. "I'll be there soon, honey." But this time he was serious. He was going on a business trip. He kissed her on the forehead, put notes and a laptop in her briefcase, put on a coat, straightened her hair, and seemed to try to remember every curve of her face. "Be careful," he said. "Don't open it to anyone, even if someone says it's me. I have the phone with me. Call me, and I'll answer." He lay down for a kiss, as a promise, and left. In the evening, Lisa came back from school, did her homework, and sat on the couch, holding a cup of warm cocoa in her hands. TV showed old detectives, where everything was orderly and predictable. Crime, motive, exposure. Her thoughts wandered through the darker corridors. She imagined how her father opened someone's office on a business trip late at night, how a lamp was burning in the hotel corridor, how the fog of someone else's city rose in the corner. But she had no reason to be alarmed. They always had a rule, not to open the door to strangers, and to call their father if something seemed strange. Time dragged on slowly. Lisa went to bed in her quiet room, with a plush bunny at her feet. Her dream was ordinary at first. First vague images of school, tests, whiteboards. But then the dream changed. She found herself on the edge of a busy highway. The night lights of the cars left long traces of light, and the noise of the engine and the rustling of the tires created a low hum. Like a distant sea, Lisa was standing on the side of the road, holding an old photo in her hands, the one where she and her father were smiling in the park. On the other side of the highway, through the stream of cars, she saw a familiar figure, his silhouette slightly bent. The coat fluttered like a man who suddenly froze on an empty road. He raised his hands to his mouth and seemed to scream. The voice was like an echo, and the cars drowned out the words. Lisa strained to catch at least something, when the hum of cars suddenly died down, as if someone had turned the volume control in the night. She could barely distinguish the whisper, "Don't open the door." The words were intermittent, as if from afar. They sounded supplication and panic at the same time. The noise suddenly became louder, and at that moment, Lisa woke up to a sharp, loud sound, heard in her house. She listened. First a quiet crack, then a repeated bell. The door. My heart started beating faster. For any child, the loneliness of the night makes the world unusually loose, and the most ordinary sounds seem threateningly close. She sat in bed, listening to the bell ringing in the house again and again, as if someone was pulling it in his hands. She put on her slippers and ran to the door in one nightgown. When she looked into the peephole, her chest was filled with vague relief. The face in the oval glass was familiar and familiar. It looked like my father had just returned. "Wait, I'll open it now," she said viciously, threw away the bowl, and was already reaching for the handle when something in the expression on his face made her look again. At that moment, Everything inside her brought her. Her eyes were wide open, unnaturally wide, and there was no usual warm shine in them. The look was tense, and his lips moved as if he was trying to squeeze the words out of his throat. But silently, they were eyes full of horror, directed directly at her. Lisa put the lock back in place again. Her body was shaking, but the decision not to open the door was firm. Some deep inner feeling, as if those words from the dream appeared in her memory. "Don't open the door." She began to call out loud, "Dad," in response. Only a persistent metal ringing. She called again and again, and the ringing trill of detonation in the corridor became more and more ruthless. There was something ceremonial about her, as if the bell was ringing not only in the door, but also in her head. She tried to talk, asking simple, saving questions. "Dad, is there anyone with you? Why don't you answer?" But her father's voice remained inaudible. She only heard the bell and her own breathing. The bell kept ringing non-stop. Jing, jing, jing. And with it, there was tension in the air, as if time was thickening itself. The hour dragged on like an eternity. The neighbors didn't come. The phone was silent, and even the street light seemed to change its brightness. Then it became dimmer. Then it intensified again. Lisa sat on the floor in the hallway, pressing her knees to her chest. Her thoughts jumped from rational explanations. Maybe one of the neighbors is playing a prank on us, or some workers confused the house, to dark versions. What if the father is in trouble? Or what if someone creates a nightmare intentionally? She wanted to call, but her father had a phone, and her own was charging in the room, and every second of going there seemed dangerous. She sat like that until her consciousness began to slip away. It wasn't fatigue. It was something like a protective shutdown. The brain used up all the reserves of anxiety and temporarily fogged up. When she woke up at dawn, the world was discouragingly ordinary. The light seeped into the crack under the door. In the kitchen, a black cup remained on the table, and in the garden a bird was singing something diligently. The bell didn't sound anymore. Her body was still shaking, but the cold of the morning air helped her recover a little. She went to the door and looked through the peephole again. The figure on the other end was still standing there. At first, Lisa experienced a huge, strange hope. Maybe he is still safe and sound. But when she reached for the handle, licking her lips to drown out the fear, a scream got stuck in her throat. The head of the standing man was pressed against the door at the level of the eyes. But it was not just a head. It was her father's severed head, pinned to the door with a large, rusty nail. The pupils were wide open, and the mouth froze in an unnatural grimace. His hair was in a mess. Dark spots were visible on his neck. Bloody marks, which, however, seemed to be already dry. The air round suddenly squeezed. Lisa felt something inside her breaking from horror and terrible loss, not only from physical, but also from symbolic meaning. Her support was destroyed. She instinctively jumped back. Hot tears crawled down her face. The voice broke out into an inept, fragile cry. "Dad!" But this word immediately trampled without an answer. Someone put a note on the door frame, next to a rusty nail. The hand, not remembering the hardness, grabbed the piece of paper. There were only 2 words written in restrained, decisive letters on it. "Smart girl." The first few seconds were perceived as unreality. She held a piece of paper, like some object from someone else's dream. Then everything came. Adrenaline, cold, pain, heart-hearted thoughts about the departed mother, about those evenings at the radio, about the promises that my father made and did not have time to fulfill. She fell on a chair. The walls seemed to tilt. The objects in the room became too close, as if the whole world suddenly narrowed to this one cruel sign. She tried to listen to the sounds of the street, hoping to hear someone's footsteps, the ringing of running help. But the sounds seemed cut off, as if a thin curtain separated her from reality. The phone was still silent. She remembered her father's words in the morning. Don't open it to anyone. And strangely enough, there was an echo of self-gratitude in this horror. The rule worked. If it weren't for this inner feeling, alive and intuitive, she could open up, and something even more terrible could happen in the house. The girl looked around the door. No one was standing on the porch. There were no traces of blood on the threshold, only quiet rust at the nail and tiny fingerprints on the pen. She took the note again and noticed that the text was written cleanly, without haste. The letters seemed confident, as if the author wanted the message to be read and understood. It was an insult and a warning at the same time. They knew she was smart. They knew her habits and used this knowledge to break her world. It became clear to her that the night was only part of the nightmare. Ahead are the police, polls, cameras, inquired eyes of neighbors and magazine headlines, which, on the one hand, highlight the truth, and on the other hand, turn any personal tragedy into a public performance. But now, in the first minutes after the discovery of the truth, she had only a physical body, trembling hands, and a wild desire to hide. She closed the door and grabbed the phone. After dialing the number her father always asked to call, she repeated his name several times. It turned out only a subscriber out of reach. Then she dialed 112. The voice on the other end trembled, but the mechanism was triggered. A few minutes later, her house was surrounded by people with flashlights. Then the police came. Then the forensics. And the fog of the night began to dissipate under the light of the searchlight. The investigation was slow and methodical. Neighbors said that they heard a bell that night, but no one saw unfamiliar cars. Surveillance cameras in the area recorded only a passing van, which stopped behind the block and then continued moving. Analysts worked with excerpts, fragments of communication, records of telephone connections, fingerprints on the pen. Soon, it turned out that the front door was damaged from the outside. Someone tried to break the bolt, but it was slammed from the inside. It looked like a deliberate attempt to lure her to open. The police left a sensation and official words for adults, but the most painful part was interrogations and views. People asked how she reacted, how much time had passed, why she did not open. She answered exactly as if she was retelling the fact. But inside, the same question kept sounding. Who could come so close to hang his head on the door? Who knew he would go home that very evening? Who knew that they had a do not open rule and decided to check if it would work? Days and weeks have turned into organized chaos. Neighbors left food at the door. Journalists came to the street, trying to look into the windows, but quickly withdrew when they saw that the door was closed. The police have established security surveillance. The girl was temporarily taken to relatives of warm but foreign origin. An old cousin whose house was full of the smells of pills and lavender. She tried to study, but the lessons merged into a foggy background. The nights were full of noises, doorbells, ticking clocks, someone's steps on the stairs,